Many times when a student graduates from an interpreting program that only has a 2-year degree, they're not quite ready to interpret right out of the program. And with UWM, when you come right out of the program, you're more prepared to work.
We need other colleges to be the same, where you would get a 4-year degree after completing the program.
Bree, your turn.
And we're still working on the educational interpreting service requirements. For community interpreting, you should have the NIC, and compared to educational interpreting, you have the EIPA. And the NIP test is pretty challenging, but a lot of times the NIPA is easier. So a lot of interpreters who can't pass the NIC will go take the NIPA, and then they have a certification and they can work. And that really is hurting the deaf community. We need to have the skill levels the same for education and community interpreting. It's tough. And we're working to set up a commission for the deaf and hard of hearing. ODHH does have one. But it's not 100% successful. There's so many steps that you have to go through. And if you want to get something set up, you have to go through all this red tape that maybe in 2 or 3 years you would be able to have a successful organization set up. So if we had a commission for the deaf and hard of hearing, that would speed up that process. So the interpreter licensure is a issue for us. It's been 5 years since we've passed the licensure. But it does seem like there's some loopholes. There's not a lot of punishment for interpreters if they break regulations. And the restricted license lasts for 6 years. That's not really sufficient. That's too long that an interpreter can interpret with a restricted license. And the community has to suffer for all those years. We need to reduce that. 2 or 3 years is enough, and then you need to be able to pass a NIC exam.
Will it be possible to change the law, or is there going to be a lot of restriction and against that? Is it going to be hard?
We do have quite a bit of documentation that we can take to them and show them that these are our complaints and these are why we have these complaints. But right now we don't really know what to do with the documentation or who to take it to. So for an example, if an interpreter breaks the CPC, there's a serious infraction of that. So often if an interpreter breaks the law and the deaf person calls the police aren't really sure what to do with that situation because again, they're going to need an interpreter to communicate with the deaf person while they're filing their complaint. And even if you take it to the court level, the judge doesn't really know deaf people or legislation or interpreting or how that works. So there's not really sufficient punishment for interpreters who break the law. That's something we're really working on, raising the standard. Same thing that happens if you take your car to a mechanic. They're required to have a license. So you take your car to the mechanic, and then when you get home after they told you it's fixed, there still is problems, it's leaking, or something is maybe even more broken when you first took it there. There is ways that you can file a complaint against the mechanic. So if you took that mechanic situation to a judge, he would be familiar with that and know what to do. But if a parallel situation where you had a complaint against an interpreter and you took that to the judge, he wouldn't be knowledgeable. And there's quite a few more issues, but I won't go all in depth into everything we're working on. So now we're going to discuss why it's important for you to be connected to WAD and you to be knowledgeable on these issues. Why do you feel it's important? Anyone?
Because you could become a better interpreter in the future.
Okay, a little bit more.
Because who am I working for? Myself, for money? Or are we working to serve the deaf community? That's really the point, what we have to ask ourselves.
Exactly.
Anything
Anyone
else?
else want to add anything? How do you get your news, your information about WAD? You can get news and information about WAD. We do send out newsletters about events. Also, if you go to events, just by being there, you'll hear things about what's coming up. And we do have roundtable discussions where everyone can give their input about concerns that they have, interpreter problems that they've noticed frequently showing up. And we have a facilitator there who will listen to our concerns and help alleviate those concerns.
Right.
So that's a way for you to be involved and gain some own information for your interpreting. If you go there and see firsthand what deaf people don't like about interpreters, you'll be able to know that that's not something you want in your interpreting. Or you can also see the flip side of that. If deaf people are speaking very highly of an interpreter, you can take advantage of that and maybe request that that interpreter be a mentor or that you want to work with that interpreter in the future.
Okay, time to switch.